Hey, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Fortified Life podcast, where we are passionate about developing a dependency on Jesus in the marketplace. I'm your host, Jason Davis, aka Mr. Fortify. I'm so excited. Every single week, we bring on authors, speakers, CEOs, those who are passionate about putting God back in business. And it's no different this week. We're going to talk about finance and money and maybe a little bit of academics too. But before I bring our guest on, let me introduce him to you. Dr. Shane Enete has worked as an investment research professional for over 10 years for large institutional asset managers. His duties included valuing public stock securities, modeling asset allocations for billion-dollar pension plans, and serving as a forensic accountant for a trillion-dollar bond manager. His research interests include how new developments in biblically responsible investing alter investment practice, the theology of financial planning, and how to reconcile the natural tension of a Christ follower between sacrificial giving and shrewd saving. Enete currently holds the Chartered Financial Analyst and Chartered Alternative Investment Analyst designations. He earned a bachelor's in business administration from the University of Southern California, an MS in mathematical finance from the University of North Carolina, Charlotte, and a PhD in personal financial planning from Kansas State University. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome to the Fortified Life, Dr. Shane Enete. Doctor, what is going on today?
Uh, I'm doing well. Thanks so much for having me.
Absolutely. Well, I got to tell you, Doctor, I'm very excited to have you on. When someone certainly reads your bio, they say, "Wow, God has graced him to be a part of a lot of things." But Doctor, as we all know, you just didn't arrive at those highlights. So, kind of take us on a journey of your professional experience and how God brought you to where you are today in 2024.
Yeah, I'd love to. So my kind of origin story with finance actually started. There's a moment I can point to, and that's when I was 15.
Hmm.
So at that year was 1995. I got a book, and so my uncle started getting interested in day trading, and he noticed I had kind of an interest in money. So he puts this book down, and it's a small little book called How to Invest 50 to $5,000. It's a classic, and I think they've done several editions, but it was just the title. I looked at the title, all of a sudden it just was a dawning on me that this was an area that I could just start learning about. There was no like degree or there was nothing in the way. And so I went I didn't read the book. I just left it on the coffee table and walked to the Barnes and Noble nearby and to the library nearby. And I came home with, 12 or 15 more books and then just spent the whole year reading. And this was before the internet, so I started going to investment clubs because that's how you kind of learned about investing. And they noticed me, and I learned a process of investing that they were ascribing. It's basically like a deep value kind of way of projecting earnings. And if you've ever, so back in the day, the big source of good fundamental data was called Value Line. And they were in these huge binders, and you could look up a company's kind of information. And so I have all these fond memories of going to a library, looking at value lines, trying to forecast kind of what would potentially be the value of this company. And I was doing that in high school. And so they noticed me doing this. And so I started leading teen investing seminars because the parents wanted their kids to learn. And so they would, bring them and the kids would be bored. And so they're like, how about we have a peer teach this to them? And so yeah, so I started doing that, and that really just sparked in me a clear vision that I wanted to do finance and I wanted to do teaching. And so God kind of just gave me a plan, a calling, if you will, and I was like, all right, let me do 10 years in the industry, and then let me parlay that into teaching. and I'll be adjuncting along the way. And so by God's grace, like the timeline unfolded that way, and I challenged it as much as I could. And so I did. The other path that I thought would be really great was inner city ministry, and
Mm.
so I went to University of Southern California. I know for you, USC means something different, but for me, it's USC in LA. And I chose that school because I love LA. I love and I wanted to be near kind of a great area of need, and it's in an inner city. And so I worked in Skid Row and did worked all along South Central. And really I was in the middle of a summer working in the inner city, and I was passing through the financial district, and I'd been interning as well in financial firms. And I still remember that moment where I was, kind of tired from the day, but it was a fine day. But I saw this like 20-year-old, he was passing out of a, investment bank kind of setting, and I saw him and my heart kind of leapt out.
Mm.
And it was a weird feeling, but it was like that's my first love, and it was just like this, it was just like a really innocent, like that's what I love, like that's where I need to be, even though I really do enjoy working in the inner city and there's such a great need. But there's also a need, to be light in the marketplace, in particular finance. And so that just gave me confirmation. Let's just keep moving with this calling. And so, yeah, so I did finance undergrad, interned every year, went out into the buy side, as they say, which is institutional money that's there. So there's no sales or prospecting because I didn't want to, I'm not really a salesperson. And it's great. I try and give my students both options. Do you want to be on the buy side or the sales side? And so anyway, so launched into the buy side and valued insurance companies, mainly Japanese and European, and then got to go transition into asset allocation with consulting groups that would manage pensions. And I had fun clients like Screenwriters Guild, and we who else? I had CalSTRS, which is the large pension of all the teachers in California, and we were on big teams. And my sister is a California teacher, and so I got to threaten her that I would ruin her retirement, if she didn't do what I wanted. But anyway, so and then just was transitioning into academia. I got my master's, and I did a master's in something more technical, because I was valuing all these companies with these crazy balance sheets, and they had all these derivatives that financial derivatives are what ruined the economy in 2008, and I
Mm.
wanted to learn more about it. And so there was a whole master's on that. And I remember my boss, he was like, "Why are you going to go learn about what everyone hates?" And I'm like, "Well, good to learn, and I love the learning." And so then, yeah, just all this while my whole mission was I want to learn and I want to figure out how to build a bridge, because right now all of the learning in investing and finance, it's like completely disjointed or separate from faith and the language around, as you kind of said, with this idea of how did you put it, with radical surrender, or no, sacrificial, can't remember in your intro.
Sacrificial giving, I think, maybe.
Something like that. I liked how you said it. But I never want to get away from that.
Yeah,
I don't want to end my life being too planned, too like, oh, I'm building wealth,
yeah.
oh, it's for the good. But no, I want to always feel like I'm had that heart, of the disciples who just left the fish on the boat, and didn't try and calculate everything. But I don't want to abandon finance, because I think it's just a beautiful field. It's a beautiful way to help. It's such a needed thing, because goods and services need to be funded, businesses need to be funded, and that's a part of God's economy. And so anyway, so the book that I just recently released is really my passion project. Oh, since 1995, since I got this, I was like, I can't learn about this and leave Jesus at the door. He needs to be the center. How do I build off of him as the foundation of this knowledge? Or he's the foundation, and how do I have this knowledge be something that is able to build on top of him? The Peter says like, I think it's Peter, or is it Paul? No, Paul, sorry. Christ's foundation, and you can build on it with gold and precious stones that don't burn up, or wood and hay that
Hmm.
burns up. And so how do I treat this knowledge and use the right material with it? And so just I'll close this kind of long story with the fact that the book, when it came out, it has a penny with a heart in it, and this is my bridge between the language of faith, the language of finance. Um, and I never noticed this, but when I got the first print of it, I looked at the penny, and the year on it was 1995, kind of
Wow.
when I was called into this. So it's so cool.
Very cool. Dr. Annette, um, thank you for that breakdown and giving us the history of how you got to where you are today. There were several things that
Sure.
sparked multiple thoughts. You said you worked, I believe, 10 years in industry before transitioning into academics. Is that just the thought process behind that? Because it sounded like you were pretty intentional. Is that a way to transition into academia? You said, okay, let me do industry, and then I'll have about a decade of experience. Let me go that way. Just curious, is that how it happens for a lot of people, or are there kind of different ways to transition into the academic world?
Yeah, there's two paths. So first, there's two types of universities.
Hmm.
There's what they call an R1, a research one university, and there's a teaching university.
Got it.
So you have to kind of first decide what kind of university you want to be a part of. So if you want to do an R1, which is any major school you've heard of, University of Georgia, over here, UCLA, USC, those are all R1 schools. Then you can't, it's rare that you would be able to be a professional and then jump in. That's just not as common. Usually the path there is to you get your undergrad, then your grad, then your PhD, and the PhD better be a really good school. And then the publications is everything. So it's publish or perish. So you have to be publishing in really good places. And if you have a practice on the side, good for you, but you better be producing good journal articles. That's how. And the practitioners at R1 schools are kind of like looked down on. They're second class citizens. They usually don't get tenure. They're kind of like contract workers, and occasionally a professor of practice, as they call them, can kind of rise and get security and be treated like, a true faculty member. But in general, it's the publications, and this is all changing. I'm giving you kind of the culture for most of the history of
Sure.
our academics. Things are changing because schools aren't getting enough funding, and so they can't
Yeah.
just have these cush faculty members who've gotten tenure and everything's been based on journal articles. Um, so that's that route I didn't want to ever go. That didn't seem attractive to me, and yeah, I just that doesn't sound fun. And I'm not smart enough for that, because that to get published in really high end journals and to get into PhD programs that are kind of the top tier, that whole world, that's kind of like not a world that I wanted to really pursue. I like having long quiet times. I like surfing on my lunch break. I like being with my family. Like I like all these things, and I want the balance. And teaching universities are where it's not publish or perish. They actually really do value you being a good teacher. And for me, my thinking was, the best teacher I can be is one who has experience in an applied field. Because I'm teaching an applied field, I better have applied it myself.
Yeah.
And so yeah, so I said, if I was teaching history, there's no way. The only way to apply that is in academics. So you don't really need to be like a curator of a museum to be a good professor.
Hmm.
Literature, I guess, being a book writer, but there's certain fields where it's most appropriate not to get. There's no real industry, but for me, it's like I'm going to teach everything a lot better if I have experience. So I did that, pursued the teaching university. If you publish, they're like, good for you. And then, but really they care about, are you teaching well? Are you contributing? Service and teaching are kind of super valuable. And then research is like a little part of what you need to do.
Mm, so insightful, Dr. Enete. Thank you for that breakdown, the teaching university versus the R1.
Yeah.
Let's talk about students for a second. So, you being at Biola University in 2024, when you look at the spectrum of finance, how do you go about preparing students for the workforce, or even if they want to go into entrepreneurship? What's your take on that? Yeah, academia is changing. Then you have education in general. There's the rise of AI and just digital courses and people being able to go to school from anywhere in the world as long as you have an internet connection. So when you reconcile where we are today with technology as well as where education is going, just how do you go about serving students?
Yeah, it's tricky. You can err on one side and have everything you do be to make them a better employee,
Hmm.
so that they have all the skills. So you're basically just apprenticeship model, how do you do the job? And then to me, the other side that is an error is we're only gonna get in a circle and read Aristotle and Plato and
Mm.
never apply anything, just kind of like just think because it feels good and it's fun. And so, I like a middle ground, obviously. Um, so for me, I mean, so I had to choose between training because I have my CFA and my CFP.
Mhm.
And so I had to choose, should I train students to become financial planners and advisors or financial analysts? Uh,
Mm.
the Biola student is so good with people. They're so relational, that I was like, let's have them get their CFP. And so we're a CFP board certified program. And the 72 learning objectives given to us are from the industry. And so I think that's important that the learning objectives are relevant to the field they're going into.
Yeah.
And so I focus on, getting them out there with networking events and building financial empathy skills, because the value proposition for money now is going beyond what a robot can do, what a
Mhm.
robo advisor, what all these like programs now can do investments really well, retirement planning really well, tax planning really well, insurance planning really well, and estate planning is on its way to being commodified as well. So no one wants to get all these reports from a robot. They want someone to live life with, and that then goes to empathy, goes to financial facilitation, being a good active listener, all those kind of soft skills. So we have a financial coaching center that I've been growing. And then we also have a student investment fund so they can manage money. Because if they're going to manage real money and they have $250,000 that they manage, they need to start working through the emotions of that,
Yeah.
in a safe space than when you get launched out. And they're going to meet in front of the board, and it's like they need to kind of like sense the consequences of managing real money. So those life skills, those connecting to people, getting learning objectives from the industry, that's kind of my philosophy. But if that was all I did, I'd feel like a failure,
Mm.
because learning needs to be a whole person. And so thankfully at a place like Biola, they all are getting a minor in Bible. So they're all having Bible classes with seminary professors. They're all doing chapel. They're going on all these like important kind of trips, and they're all connecting with each other. There's all these conferences. So it's like that's helping to form a community and a place where they can kind of explore their faith. I can't do that. Like, I mean, I biblically integrate. I try and make sure that they see the unity of truth, that
Mhm.
everything they learn has Christ as the center, including investment. My retirement planning class, I call the Lord of the Retirement. And
That's good.
we they're Frodo, and I mimic his journey. And so like for example, Bree is the first stop, and that represents Social Security and Medicare, where you think you're safe, And because Brie, I don't, if for those that don't know, it's this first stopping point, and it's this hotel with a wall, but these evil the dark riders that are following them, they just get in and they try and kill them. And so Social Security is kind of this false sense of security, and it's good. It's a shelter, but it's also dangerous. You got to keep
Mhm.
journeying on. And the ring is accumulation, and it's something you manage, but you have to fear it and conquer it in order to have it not overtake you. And so those are kind of like, it's important for me to kind of make sure that they don't just learn accumulation without seeing the positives and negatives of it, and we should all fear it for sure. Yeah.
Very cool. Dr. Enut, you caused me to want to enroll in one of your classes today.
It
We're talking about Lord of the Rings and finance. That seems pretty cool to me.
was fun.
Dr. Enut, when you were talking about your experience, you talked about how your work with evaluating pension plans, and just in your experience where we are today, not a lot of companies offer them. That's kind of the old way of retirement. There's a lot more focus on company sponsored plans, or the whole, DIY, do it yourself, as long as you have tools. And then you mentioned the robo advisors. So just your thoughts on pension plans today in 2024, and will we continue to see that trend of pensions going away, and what even makes a good pension for those who still have it? How can they uh, either personally or work with a professional to say, hey, this is a good pension plan, and at least I can look forward to that later on in life?
As pension's a beautiful thing, but it's a not sustainable thing.
Mm,
And so the 401k, so most pensions, they recognize that they have promises that they can't keep, so they're underfunded. And so then they transition to a 401k, which doesn't give any promise. There is a promise of contributing into it and matching
mhm,
kind of what the employee will do. And so historically, you've actually gained more wealth through 401ks than pensions, because there's no ceiling. The sky's the limit. So if the stock market is well, then you actually gain more wealth. But pensions are, I mean, I'm a risk averse person. If I was in a pension system, I would be a very happy person. But they're all going away. I mean, they just have to. They're all
mhm,
underfunded. You can't just keep raising taxes for a select group of public employees. Public employees and a few high specialty groups are the only people that have pensions anymore.
mhm,
However, as the traditional pension goes away, there's a rise of, so the 401ks are actually going to start to transition to what are called hybrid. And a hybrid is featured in Australia. There's actually a good amount of hybrid plans starting up in America, and they're just so cool. They're the way, so they provide a floor promise and then a limited upside. And it's just like, it's the best of both worlds, in my opinion. So you don't get an underfunded pension as much because they're not promising you, 85% of your salary for the rest of your life, but they
mhm.
are promising you a guaranteed rate of return, guaranteed minimum payment, and then they're letting you experience the upside, and all of that will help mitigate any kind of liability, so they can fulfill their promise. Companies are not quite as on the hook if there's a stock market crash. So anyway, so yeah, and I just think it's such a mistake for people to have to figure out how to manage their money in a market when they have no training. You're 22 and you're an engineer, and they're like, here's this 401k, go ahead and invest it, and they have no idea. No one has any idea, and
Right.
it needs to be professionally managed. And so, um, and so, yeah, so I think it's such a mistake to do the 401k and just like let everyone flounder. And the studies all show people do really bad.
Mm.
And so anyway, the hybrid plan is kind of, to me, I'm hoping will rise and be something at least a little bit where people feel a little more sense of security, plus the neat benefit of an upside.
Very cool. Thank you for that breakdown and giving us a snapshot of what to expect in the future, hybrid plan. So folks, make sure you maybe earmark, put the doggy ears on your notes there. Dr. Enut, perhaps the thing we've been building to is to your book, Whole
Mm.
Heart Finance. That's your latest work. So talk to us about Whole Heart Finances, a Jesus-centered guide to managing your money with joy. What is the kind of the central message that you want readers to know in the book? And what was the inspiration for writing it as well?
Yeah, really the inspiration came at age 15. I went through all these books and I'm like, and I was passionate about my relationship with Jesus at that point. And I'm like, I can't learn this and not grow closer to Christ. Like there's no purpose in learning anything if you don't worship the Lord. But I felt like the learning of these things, there's a big hole. Like I didn't know how to reconcile growing things over time, growing money over time, and a radical surrender to the lordship of Jesus. And so I kept looking and looking. I'm like, all right, well, I think I have to make that book. I think I need to do it. And there's good books, but it's just I want people to, as they learn about money, to grow closer to Jesus and not farther away.
Yeah.
I want I want people to be able to have a sense of financial planning and investing and saving all are tools that help facilitate a greater level of giving over your whole life. And Paul talks about this in Second Corinthians where he's like, giving is an act of grace and you benefit from it. And it's largely because it connects us to the gospel over and over again.
Yeah.
And if is there some way we can give more? Well, there is. A planned person who plans to give will give more than someone who doesn't plan to give. And one of the coolest tools to help sustain higher levels of giving is, these saving reservoirs, these, credit management plans, these saving spending plans and budgeting tools, like all of that can work together to create kind of this real solid foundation, this financial resilience that avoids debt, has good margin that then sustains a higher level of giving, which then lets you draw near to Christ like in an incredible way. There's this great purpose, and you're imaging Christ to the world through your giving lifestyle that is elevated now because of what you've learned about money. So that's kind of the heart of the book.
Mm. I love it. Dr. Enet, I have my own copy. So
Right.
I'm just letting you know I have it. And I love how you broke down the book into four parts. Bring your whole heart, invite Jesus in. Part two, spend with your whole heart, guard your whole heart, save with your whole heart. Just how did that kind of outline come to you? Because I love how it seems like it builds
Yeah.
on the foundation they build on each other.
So yeah, the beginning is just getting Christ. Most people assume if they're honest with Jesus about money, he doesn't like money, and so he's going to say, "All right, I'm so glad you're honest with me right now. Go ahead and get rid of it." And, it's a little bit dirty, and it's a Gnostic view. It's this idea of the spiritual and the carnal being
Hmm.
totally separate. Material world is bad. Um, and so the first part is how do we see Jesus as physical and see the material world as redeemable, see money as a tool that can draw us near, that we care about deeply in our hearts. And so for us to deny that is to be fractured in our hearts. And for us to let's say you get married and then you don't talk about money with your spouse, that's fracturing the relationship.
Mm.
So and then I walk through the most dangerous question a Christian could ask, which is, should I give all of my money away? And because my daughter has this wonderful story where she gave all of her money away in response to a gospel story. And so then I'm just like, is that the pure way of being Christian, is to give all your
Mm.
money away? And so just kind of walking through, the ending conclusion is that it's all grace. And so when you approach things with grace and in a way, in a relational way, then it's not necessarily about your behavior that makes you right with God. It's more about your trust and your love, and recognizing God's love for us that goes way beyond our behavior. And we can't like make God love us more. And that frees us then to kind of think better about money. And so he won't love us more if we give everything away. He won't love us more if we, hoard. And so then it's just a matter of moving forward with his calling and seeing the mission he's given us. And then I walk towards Paul and how he says, "Hey, this isn't about like some rule or law. This is about see if you can excel in it.
Hmm.
Like move and that's going to look different for everyone." So I wanted to kind of get the theology around money to first, and then the first step in any kind of financial training is to spend less than you earn, And that's kind of like to get organized with money, to recognize with gratitude how God's providing everything through what I call establishing financial gratitude journals, which is just basic tracking habits that you can be successful in using an app or paper. And if you can do that, then that's the foundation for so many good behaviors. For you can't do any planning if you're bleeding
Right.
out your money. If your ship is the first step on any boat is to get the water out of the boat. And so that's why I have like, all right, let's spend with your whole heart. Let's make sure you see spending as a way that you can be generous, as a way, and then as a foundation to elevate your generosity if you can get it under control. So you need some discretionary income, and then I moved kind of to the next step, which is like the anti-giving is debt. Debt is like the ultimate anti-giving.
Hmm.
So if you can't get your spending under control, then you end up suffering and losing your freedom, kind of
Hmm.
becoming victim to credit predators. And so walking through proper use of credit, proper ways of thinking, and a huge mistake people make is they think of credit as borrowing, but credit is someone willing to borrow, not necessarily actually borrowing. And having good credit, you don't actually have to borrow any money. And so there's steps that people can make that create this, again, a more margin, more resilience that then leads towards more generosity. And then finally, then once everything's stable, you're avoiding debt, you have a spending plan, your spending's under control, you're worshiping the Lord, you're seeking to be generous. Saving can elevate everything, because you become even more resilient. Earned income comes and goes. We all have inevitable financial winters.
Hmm.
And as a farmer uses a barn to weather the wet winter, we can use savings to weather our winters. And it's a tool that God would be happy to help, cultivate in us because it shows self-control, and then it also helps you plan a little bit better to give not just now, but also in your elder years and during your times when you're in emergencies and all that.
So good, Dr. Enette. Folks, this is why you need to go out and get your own copy. Where can people go and purchase the book? I'm sure you've got their mouth watering now. They're ready to dive in.
So Amazon and Tyndale, also it's on their site, but Amazon's usually the easiest. And there's a Spanish translation coming out in October if you want
Mm.
to read it in Espanol. And so, but yeah.
Very cool. That's actually a perfect segue, Dr. Ina. I'm glad you mentioned that. So, guys, Spanish version, you heard it first here on the Fortified Life, coming in October. We are in October. Dr. Enette, as we're in Q4, what are you most excited about, either closing out the year or going into 2025?
I have research on how people and how they understand the world, which is people call worldview.
Mhm.
Do you think that the material world is the only thing that matters or exists? Do you think there is something beyond the material world? Do you think God is polynomial? Yeah, or not poly? Uh, I'm blanking on the word monotheistic, polytheistic.
Yeah.
Anyway, all the different worldviews. I've been studying how that impacts your saving behavior, your spending behavior, how financial planners can have spiritual conversations about worldviews because everyone has one. And this year I'm going to be researching how people's giving is impacted by their worldview, and I have a
Mm.
lot of good data on people's worldview and their giving behavior. And so I'd love to know if someone is, let's say, postmodern, where everything is a meta narrative, nothing exists outside of nothing's there's multiple versions of yourself, because there's all sorts of uh, they take quantum physics very, very literally.
Mhm.
And so like how does that person give? How do they think about giving compared to, let's say, a Buddhist or a Christian or an existentialist or an atheist? So it's going to be really fun just to kind of flesh that out and see what are the practical working outs of people's belief and then how they deal with money.
Very cool. That sounds like a riveting write-up. Lots of perspective there. Dr. Enette, I just want to thank you for taking time out to come on the show. You have blessed us. You've given us wisdom. You've broken down the book. Folks, this is an episode you're going to want to come back and listen to this one. We'll have all of Dr. Enette's contact information, all his books, resources, and the show notes, fortifiedlifepodcast.com. Dr. Enette, for the listeners out there, what's the best way for them to connect with you, your resources, or even if they choose to enroll at Biola University?
So for me and my resources, wholeheartfinances.com
Yeah.
is a great website. It has a small group experience, like a 4 lesson cohort, where you can go through video and pictures and go through the content of the book in a small group. It also has links to the book, and it has my email. So that's a great way to connect to me. If you just Google Biola financial planning, you can see our financial planning offerings, and if you want to connect in that way.
Love it, folks. You heard it directly from the doctor himself. That's all we have time for. Again, thank you so much for hanging out with us here on the podcast. We'll have to do this again sometime in the
Yeah.
future. Who knows? Maybe your next work that
Sure,
comes
sure.
out will have you back on. But I know I was blessed. I know the listeners will be blessed as well.
Thanks, Jason, for having me.
For sure. Well, folks, that's all we have time for here on the Fortified Life podcast. You know how we end things. Don't compartmentalize your faith and the marketplace. And from the boardroom to the bathroom, God is with you. We'll see you next time on the Fortified Life podcast.